basics are going to take you a little bit longer. Chanel?
All right, thank you. Well, let's get to a cover that caught everybody's attention. I'm not talking about it already. Here it is. It's the current issue of Philadelphia Magazine with the headline, Being White in Philly.
Oh, yes. The article asserts that, quote unquote, in a city that is largely poor and segregated, white people have become afraid to say anything at all about race for fear of backlash. So, wondering if this was true, we took to the streets yesterday afternoon. To be exact, we went to the Fairmount section of the city to ask you this.
Do you agree with this statement? Everyone might have a race story, but few whites risk the third rail danger of speaking publicly about it. Race is only talked about in a sanitized form when it's talked about at all, with actual thoughts and feelings.
It's hard to say. I mean, I think it's an individual type thing, you know what I mean? Because, I mean, some people are very comfortable, especially when they live in a society where it's multicultural and stuff. They feel comfortable saying, hey, you know, it not being racist, just being, you know, open to just a personal thought.
Another viewer asked that we not show his face had this to say.
Is it tough being white in Philadelphia? I think for some people, maybe, yeah. You know, if you're a minority, you know, if you're the only white person living on your block, I think that, well, you know, there's probably a similar ratio of black people that are just as racist as some of your redneck white people, and that can be tough, you know?
And still another viewer said this.
They may have to watch what they say because they don't know what type of class of person is right next to them at any time. So, you know, this could have some truth to it, especially in this community.
It's a great discussion to have, whether
Sure
it's
is.
uncomfortable or not. It's time for the discussion.
Well, look who's here, editor-in-chief of Philadelphia Magazine, Tom McGrath is here. Hi,
Good
Tom.
morning.
Good to see you. And our favorite professor over at LaSalle University. Charles, thank you for being with us.
Nice to be here again.
So it's so interesting and ironic. It's basically, you didn't write it. It's another writer by the name of Robert Huber.
Right, Robert Huber.
And his son is, what, I think 19, and he goes to Temple University. He's concerned about his son because he's living at 19th and Diamond. Ironically, just last night, 1 block away, 4 Temple students, co-eds, got tied up with duct tape. They were robbed right here in this apartment just off the Temple campus. So I understand his concerns, but wouldn't anybody of any race be concerned about living in this particular area?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, crime affects people who are both white and black, so that's not the issue in this particular case. Our interest in this whole story was about really, you know, here we are, it's 50 years after the height of the civil rights movement, and Philadelphia remains a largely segregated city. I mean, there's big gulfs in terms of culture, in terms of economics. You know, a third of African Americans in the city live below the poverty line. And we think that's a fairly disturbing thing. And it doesn't get talked about very often. And I think part of the reason is that white people are afraid to say what they think.
Well, I think that, you know, anytime you want to have an article or an argument or a conversation based in intellect and not ignorance, then I'm completely open. So with this one, is that really true? Are there a lot of white people in Philly who just aren't saying what they think? I didn't realize it was that bad.
Yeah, I think that it's nice that they're raising conscience about race. I think that it's off, and I'll tell you why I think it's off. Is that white people talk about race all the time. They may not talk about it in the interracial setting of the water cooler at work, but I have my students do an assignment where they for 3 weeks have to listen to what their family members say about race. And this is, again, white, black, Asian, they're all talking about race, often in stereotypes, often not. But people talk about race. It's not often done publicly because people are scared they might say something that is misconstrued.
And that's part of his point, right? It's just
Sure.
that people are afraid.
Yeah. Afraid to talk about it publicly,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
Well, do you think black people are afraid to talk about their true feelings in public as well?
That's a good question. I'm actually not sure about that.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, there's certainly plenty of examples where white people have thoughts about certain things and are afraid to say, you know what, if I say this out loud, I'm going to be branded a racist, so they don't say anything. And one of the points that the story tries to make is that, you know, white people, especially white middle-class people, just sort of take a pass on large sections of Philadelphia because to try and engage in it is too taxing for them. So they just ignore it, which is not a good thing at all.
Right, but they can take a pass. I mean, so we have 600,000 white people in Philadelphia proper, right? And we're the 9th most segregated city in the country. We live in bubbles, black bubbles, Latino bubbles, Asian bubbles. So most whites can navigate their day in a lot of ways and not even interact
Well,
with.
it's changed a little bit, like in Fairmount section of the city.
Well, that's why he
Mount Airy.
Could you name 5 neighborhoods that have been racially integrated for more than 2 decades in Philadelphia? You can't.
No, you
Mount
can't.
Airy? Okay, get Mount Airy off the table. Tell me 5 neighborhoods that are not gentrification, because that's a different story. We live in segregated neighborhoods.
Why? We just don't
Because
trust each other?
No, I mean, look, it's impossible not to look at this without looking at the history.
Yeah.
The greatest giveaway to white Americans was the suburbanization. I mean, the suburbs were financed by the federal government. There was enormous white flight after the war. And if you were black or brown, you couldn't go into these neighborhoods.
Now, with that said, I think it's very interesting. He went to Fairmount, for example, where there's an area where you mentioned, a lot of, white professional, middle class, whatever you want to call them, people are moving there. And you're starting to see blacks and whites. But there's also still, people who have lived there for years of black and white. So that neighborhood in particular was of interest. What was your takeaway from this article as far as even just Fairmount is concerned?
Well, it's one of the reasons that Bob Huber, the writer, actually chose that neighborhood to report the story in, because, as Chip says, that the idea that there are white Philadelphians who can just completely ignore race, they can sort of make their way around it. Fairmount is an area where you really can't ignore it, that it's sort of part of the daily existence, which is why Bob went there and talked to people in that neighborhood to get their feelings about it. And one of the things he found was that among white people, there's a huge range of opinions about race. And I think that's one of the things that the article shows.
Well, I'm glad you addressed, I think maybe in the forward of the magazine, that you don't have any African Americans on your editorial board. So did you have second thoughts about doing this piece?
Sure, we had lots of conversations about whether we had the sort of right to do this story or not. And the fact that we have no African Americans on our editorial staff, it's not something I'm proud of. It's certainly an issue that we need to address, and it's actually a magazine industry problem.
And on Twitter yesterday, some of my friends were saying, well, I wish they would have interviewed some African Americans. And I thought, we've done stories with just talking to blacks.
Well, I think, again, the beauty of journalism is you get to hear opinions that, whether you like, you don't like, there's a discussion there. So
but there's also the selective attention. I thought it was interesting that this is one very small slice of the white population that's in transitional neighborhoods that are poor, and that are, the one guy they interviewed was kind of an old-style Jim Crow racist, and that's out there. But, there's again, I think that I'm a sociologist, so I like to see a sample that is more representative of the population. It seemed that some of the characters were cherry-picked, and I don't think it gives us a very good picture of the kind of, as you said, the large array of racial attitudes among whites in Philadelphia.
It's one man's take.
Right, that's exactly right.
It's one man's take.
Well, it's a discussion to have, and will be continued. Thank you guys both for coming in this morning. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.